Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to our plant-powered Metro New York sponsored monthly cooking show, Cooking with Chef Carole. My name is Wendy Sachs, and I'm on the board of Plant-Powered Metro New York. And again, want to extend a special welcome to everyone who's joined us. We are being co-sponsored today by the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan. And so welcome to the members of the JCC, and also welcome to some of the current Jumpstart members who are joining us today. It's lovely to have you on our show. And congratulations on getting as far as you have so far. I know it's been a rough, maybe not rough, but an interesting week and a half or 2 weeks for you. Anyway, Plant-Powered Metro empowers people to achieve better health and overcome chronic disease through a whole food, plant-based approach to nutrition. We offer evidence-based education, resources, and a grassroots network of support to create community and to inspire change. Together as leaders, organizers, and educators, we raise awareness about the dramatic benefits of whole food plant-based eating, empower individuals to make their own lifestyle adjustments, and lead projects that spark changes in food policy, practice, and culture. And one thing I just want to share, we've been discussing lately, some of you who've been doing this for a long time know, I know that we often focus here on how so many of these foods can improve chronic disease and even reverse chronic disease. But sometimes we forget to mention how pleasurable it is to be healthy and to feel healthy, and how these foods really inspire us to just lead healthy lives. So with that in mind, we're doing this cooking show. Okay, it's November and it's just beginning to have a chill in the air for some of us in more ways than one. Vegetables are shifting at the local farmers markets. Apples, squashes, radishes, potatoes of all kinds are still abundant, at least here in the Northeast. And people are starting to plan their Thanksgiving meals. As always, we encourage you to buy locally and eat organic, and even better, to eat regeneratively grown fruits and vegetables, because the soil health matters to our health, and you want to eat from the best soil possible. At Plant-Powered Metro, we have an array of exciting offerings this month. We're doing number 2 of a 3-part series called Know Your Numbers, Achieving Your Healthy Weight. And we're working with a doctor who will actually be able to decipher all those lab tests that we often get when we go to the doctor. That's Wednesday, November 13th from 7:30 to 8:30 online. There's a plant-powered cooking class in person called Rethink Thanksgiving here in New York on November 18th from 6:30 to 9 on Houston Street. And there's a Harlem movie night. We're showing Plant Pure Nation Tuesday, November 19th from 6 to 9. And then Eating for Health and Longevity and Anti-Aging at the Marlene Meyerson JCC, and then part 3 of Know Your Numbers, and finally a potluck in downtown Brooklyn towards the end of the month, November 25th. I highlight these just so you can go to the website, look at all the events. Please come join us in person, and of course, please join us online for any of these guidelines. Let us know where you are in the chat. Also, please ask questions in the chat. Carole usually allows time during her demo, and if not, we'll save a few minutes at the end to answer as many questions as we can. And if you're enjoying the presentation, please like us on Facebook or YouTube, or I think we're on LinkedIn now, so please, if you're watching there, please say hello and like us. So I know what's on the menu today, which is what I usually ask. And I know that one of the things, the ingredients, are mushrooms. We're doing Thanksgiving bookends today, starters and desserts. So a quick fun fact about mushrooms. In ancient times, Egyptians and Asians used mushrooms to produce longevity tonics. Even Otzi the Iceman, the 5,300-year-old mummy, frozen mummy, found in Europe in 1991, was carrying dried mushrooms when he died. On a more practical note, mushrooms are considered a superfood. They're known for I don't have to go into too much of the science, but Suffice to say that they have immune boosting effects thought to protect us against infections and cancers. And if you're wondering what I'm reading from, as usual, it's Dr. Furman's 100 Best Foods. Not sure if you can see this, can't really see myself on camera. So there you have it. Okay, Carole, we're ready to go. Announcements are done.
Yay! Wendy, thanks for the fun facts. Always great to see the Dr. Furman book that we both love. And of course, I love mushrooms so much. And I was obsessed with stockpiling them during the pandemic because I knew they were a superfood and I knew how good they were for our immunity. And I thought it'd be really great to have a soup as a starter for Thanksgiving. I mean, there's all sorts of soups that we make for Thanksgiving. It could be a butternut squash soup or any kind of kabocha squash soup. But at some point in the meal, you're going to have mushrooms. And I thought, why don't we make this soup a mushroom soup? And then we're going to bookend, as Wendy mentioned. We're having a starter and then we're having a finisher. And the finishing thing will be a sweet potato pie, which I am totally obsessed with. It is better than a pumpkin pie. And then, of course, the meal, you might be scratching your head saying, well, what do I do to replace that turkey? What do I do to replace you still can have a lot of the same things that you're used to when you're on a whole food plant-based lifestyle. But I know for some people, there are some issues of what to cook. So I want to just take a minute to remind everyone that if you go to Plant Powered Metro New York's YouTube channel, and maybe you're already on that, and you go to the playlists, there's a place called playlists, and you click on playlists. Lots of people have playlists, but there's one that's just my shows for the last 4 years. And if you scroll down and you just go into all those November shows, you will find all sorts of sides. Brussels sprouts with grapes. You'll find what I call pom-pom mashed potatoes, where I make mashed potatoes and I scoop them with a big scooper into a casserole pan and sprinkle paprika on them. There are Brussels sprouts, shaved Brussels sprouts that look like kind of like a coleslaw. There's so many ideas these last few years, and I try not to repeat myself. So I'm just saying, besides the regular places that you go online looking for recipes, you can go back to the old shows because they're all there. So that's what I wanted to remind you. So let's get started with the soup first. It has a few steps. And the very first step is that we need to rehydrate dried mushrooms. Now, in the recipe, I suggest that you use 1.5 to 2 ounces of mushrooms. And that's how I made this original recipe, with almost 1.5 to 2 ounces of dried mushrooms, because I have a big jar full of just mixed dried mushrooms. But I realized when I went to the store to just buy a package of mushrooms, dried mushrooms, whether it be a mushroom medley for a stir fry or buying porcini mushrooms, that one tiny little 5-ounce bag, this is 5 ounces, this is 7.5 ounces, one can cost $6. So what I want to just tell you is that when I say use 1.5 to 2.5 ounces, it's going to be up to you. You can just use one package. It's okay. You can even skip this step. It's just that I super like to have the dried mushrooms, and the broth that you get from them actually really enhances the soup. So I'm going to take these mushrooms here, and it's just a mixture. And I boiled some, look at here is these beautiful mushrooms here. These are my taki mushrooms in this bag right here, but there's also a mixture. So I boiled water. I actually had a little extra stock. So I want to say I boiled a little extra stock so the water will be really very, very hot. And I do want to open this bag of mushrooms just to show you the porcini mushrooms, which probably are my very favorite dried mushroom. And they're the most expensive of all of them. And we'll just use a few of those in here. Now, ideally, you want these dehydrated mushrooms to sit in the water, the hot water, for at least 30 minutes. because you need to get them rehydrated again. Okay, so we've got those, and you actually want to make sure that they're not floating to the top. So I'm just gonna kind of push them down, and they're not going to sit 30 minutes today because we don't have that kind of time, but they'll cook, and I made the water boiling, so I think that they will get rehydrated. What's super important is that when they're rehydrating, they make an amazing, strong mushroom stock. And you're going to want to scoop out the mushrooms, and then you're going to take the stock and you're going to pour it through a sieve or even a cheesecloth, because often there will be some bits of dirt left from the mushrooms in that stock. So these mushrooms looked very clean, so I don't think we have to worry about that. But I just wanted to put that idea into your head that when you're rehydrating, to always look at that stock. Never throw it away, because it's super strong and quite delicious.
Carole,
So yes,
I'm just
when
going to interrupt for a moment. While you're on the subject of mushrooms, if someone's cooking along with you today and they cannot get the dried mushrooms right now, will the flavor still be good using the?
Oh yes, I actually want to say that it's optional to have the dried mushrooms. It's just added extra, okay? It
Super.
enhances the flavor, and it gives you that great stock. So it kind of gives you two things. It gives you different kinds of variety of mushrooms. That's my goal, is to have a variety of mushrooms. But it's fine to omit that.
Great. And then you mentioned stockpiling mushrooms. Um, one participant was saying that her mushrooms never last very long.
Ah,
How can they be
I'm
stockpiled?
so happy that you mentioned that, because yeah, I think that people keep them poorly. I think they store them poorly. And it's one is because many people at their grocery store only have the choice to buy it in a plastic
True.
container that
Mhm.
comes wrapped with saran wrap. And
Yep.
that is, and some of us can buy them in bulk and pick them and buy them by the pound. But if you are able to do by the pound and not buy the little plastic container, the plastic container with the plastic wrap around it is the worst way to keep them, because moisture builds up, and
Right.
that's how they spoil right away. Honestly, if I could show you my fridge, I would. But I have probably 4 bags, brown bags, little like lunch bags, that I buy the mushrooms in, and I actually keep them in those bags. And so keeping them in those bags just keeps them very fresh. And what happens is, if for some reason one of those bags gets to the back of the refrigerator, which we all do, we all let something go bad in the back of the refrigerator. The amazing thing is that the mushrooms, if they're in the brown bag, just dry out. They literally don't, they shrivel like a raisin or a prune, and they shrivel down, and those, they become dried mushrooms. So you are still able to use them. You actually just have to rehydrate them, so you're at least not throwing them out. Okay.
Very good.
And I want to say that when I was living in New York and had a Trader Joe's right down the road from me, I would go and buy those frozen medleys of their mushrooms, which is a mixture of mushrooms, which I loved. And that was how I stockpiled mushrooms in the freezer, because those bags of mushrooms are pretty great. And they're frozen and they're fine.
Super.
So we are getting the pan hot, as we always do. We have a lot of vegetable broth that I've made over here on the side. And I do want to just take a minute I just have to say that I want to publicly thank Wendy for, I don't know, just being attuned to what I said. I did sometimes don't realize that I said I really would like to have these soup cubers, and she actually sent them to me for my birthday. So I'm going to the freezer right now, and I just want to show you very quickly about what we discussed last time. It's like a big ice cube tray, and this morning I made a big pot of broth out of all the frozen onion skins, tomatoes, and all the celery and carrot. And look at, I am storing broth in these cubes. It's so awesome. And inside, it has measurements of a half a cup or 1 cup. So I filled them all up to the 1 cup line. And they're not quite done yet, but I do want to show you. It's like having a gigantic cube, but it's broth, right? And they come out, I'm sure, but I don't want to really pop it out, but there it is. It's pretty great. And I just want to publicly thank Wendy for sending those off to me for my birthday, which was kind of a fun thing.
That's just super, Carol. I'm glad you received your supers. It's
My
super.
super is super, and they're in the freezer for during the week because I
That's
have a
great.
lot of other broth that I did need to freeze, and I'm just going to get them back in there. It's like
What I
having
love
big.
about this is for the people who are in the jumpstart, when we talk about batch cooking, it's a great way if you're making your soup today and you don't finish all of it, you can put it in one of these um, super things at SOUPER, I think it's called super.com. You can store it that way in your freezer, and it makes it a lot easier when you're rehydrating during the week.
And it's not even just for broth, Wendy. It could be for today's soup. It could
Yeah.
be for, like we could freeze black bean soup or mushroom soup or any kind of soup that you make. It's just for storing soup. So it's awesome. The other thing I forgot to show you, Wendy, that I got from
Oh
from
my
David
gosh.
was I got this great welcome. It says, "Welcome to my cooking show." So I have to show that off too while I'm thanking people for gifts. I don't normally get so many gifts, but it was kind of fun to get cooking gifts. I love that. So I have mushrooms already sliced. I bought white ones and white button mushrooms and cremini mushrooms, and I sliced them all. And I also have shiitake mushrooms. And I just want to remind people that when you have shiitake mushrooms, you always want to cut off the stem because the stem is not good for us necessarily to eat like the regular mushrooms. So you want to cut the stem. And so I'm kind of just cutting them. I have them here on my thing. And we're going to start to saute. Now, normally we saute in water or broth. For those of you that have used oil in the past, you don't really need it. And it's full of calories and full of fat and not so good for you. So we are just going to put these onions. I chopped one whole onion, a sweet onion, and the pan is hot. And how do I know that? One, because I'm standing near it. But two, if we put a little water in it, it's immediately steaming. You can hear it, you can see it. And these onions are going to go right in here. Now, normally I take a little broth and I actually put it in with the onions. But today I'm going to do a little something different to show you that you can be a little inventive and use tamari or coconut aminos in this beginning step right here. You can actually saute right now in if you have tamari or you want to use your coconut aminos. And we actually need, how much do we need in this recipe? I have to look. I think it's probably it's 1 tablespoon. So we need 1 tablespoon of tamari in the recipe. So I'm going to just take liberty and actually saute right into the with the onions right as we're doing it. And let me get a spoon. I have a spoon here, and we're just going to let that cook. And we're going to lower this a little bit. So this would be like a medium flame. I don't have a flame. This is an electric burner. So it's a little harder to control. But we're basically sauteing these onions. Now, the next thing that's going to go in here is garlic. And we need a lot of garlic for this recipe. I'd say 6 to 8 cloves, and really go to the eight or nine. You cannot be overboard with the garlic. And I'm guessing that I've chopped. All the garlic cloves are, some are big, some are little. It's always kind of sorted out, saying the big one with the little one equals one. And so I try to figure all that out. But if I were to measure it, I'm just going to show you. I'm going to take this tablespoon, and I think I probably have a good 2 tablespoons of garlic. Okay, I'm just going to take it out of this. I did about 8 cloves, and I just want to help you to understand about how much. This is a heaping tablespoon, and there's just a teeny bit left over here. So I'm going to say that you need at least 2 tablespoons of chopped garlic, okay? In the recipe, I mentioned 6 to 8 cloves, but we just measured it out, and it's about 2 heaping tablespoons. So that's looking really good already. And the next things that we're going to do is in our pan, we're going to cook the mushrooms, but we want to get the herbs in there right away. So I say that you could use fresh rosemary, which is like 1 sprig, or I have 2 actually here. You can use thyme. You could use one or the other, or you could use both. It doesn't matter, but you do want the flavor of thyme or rosemary. It's kind of a good marriage of that with the mushrooms. And I'm just taking a piece of cooking string here and I'm tying it in a knot. It's often called a bouquet garni. And I just want to tie it so that it's cooking in there, but we're going to be able to easily take it out. And then I have 1 bay leaf. Okay, so those are the spices. And you're gonna ask me, can you use dry instead of fresh? Yes, you can. I'm gonna end up taking out this fresh spice before we blend the soup. So it's really gonna really be in there more for the flavor. But and I'm gonna just show you what that's looking like right now. Just the onions and the fresh herbs. And what we're going to do is that's what I'm heating up on a medium heat. Now, if your onions, for any reason, were sticking in your pot, you would get some of your broth, and I'm just going to shake this up a little bit because the sediments have kind of gone to the bottom. But if for some reason you find that your onions are sticking, mine are really not sticking, but you would just take a little teeny broth. I'm just taking my tablespoon, and you would just pour it on top, just a little bit, give it a little moisture. You never want it swimming in a lot of broth. You just want it a little bit, and you just stir it all, and it's all comes together. Now, we want to start this. Already smells phenomenal, and we haven't gotten even the mushrooms in there. So I'm going to now put this on a much higher flame because ultimately when you cook mushrooms, you want to sear them and you want them to brown because they're going to release a lot of juices of their natural juices. And that juice is going to add to our flavor, our strong mushroom flavor. So I'm going to take my mixed mushrooms. So I have the cremini, I have the white button, and I have the shiitake. And again, you could just make it with one kind of mushroom, but variety is really, really king, I want to say. Okay, so I'm pouring all those mushrooms into there, right like that. Easy like that. And then we're just going to kind of collect things here. Now, I'm going to give this a really good stir. I've put it on a higher heat, and I'm just going to get it so that those mushrooms, now the mushrooms are pretty much filling the entire pot. They're almost to the top. And we haven't even added our special dehydrated mushrooms. So let's look at those mushrooms. Ideally, what I want to do is let's get this bowl again, because that will be, and I have a spoon with holes. And again, it would be ideal if these had 30 minutes to sit, but it's okay. They are pretty soft. You see, they're very big, some of them. And we just want to take all those mushrooms out. And again, this is an optional step, but one that I kind of encourage you to have. Because look, you get these beautiful, here's a black mushroom, and there's just a variety of mushrooms here. And I think that's going to make it very special. I hear the oven preheating because I just did that for our pie earlier. And I'm just going to cut these up because some of the soup is going to get pureed, but not all the soup. So you don't want these mushrooms to be bigger than bite-sized pieces. So it is kind of, it's pretty important for you to give them a good rough chop so that they end up smaller than, you know, the bigger pieces that when you buy that in the package and they come in big mushroom pieces. You want them to be bite-sized pieces, right? And I want to be able to show you this stalk. It's very dark and very beautiful. You can't see it in the pot right now, but I'm going to see if I can grab a glass maybe to show it to you because it's so beautiful. Now, my dog is at the bottom of my feet here. I didn't put her away like I normally do. And if she starts to cry, I will have to put her away. But she is sitting here by the bottom of my feet because she knows I'm cooking. And I'm trying to think how I'm going to show you this very beautiful. Oh, I have a jar here. And I'm just going to carefully, I think this is not so hot. And I'm just going to show you how dark and beautiful this broth is. Can you everyone see how dark that is and beautiful? And if you were to smell it, it smells like mushrooms. I mean, it's just like you practically could drink that. Now at the bottom, there are some sediments, but there's no dirt in here. This is the sediments that I had. There's just a few. They've actually stayed in the bottom of the pan. So I'm fine with just using this as part of our stock. I'm going to move that. And I pulled out a few mushrooms. These black mushrooms you really want to make smaller because they end up nice to slice them. So all of these mushrooms are going to go eventually into this pot as well. But let's see what's happening because I've not been paying attention. Now it is possible that there's sediments at the bottom because your mushrooms might be sticking, but mine are moving all around. And oh my gosh, Wendy, you and I could eat this whole bowl right this minute. I know it because you love the mushrooms like I do. And I'm just going to show you so that you're totally tantalized by the way they look. Like, look at the mushrooms.
We
You
could
see,
sit down and just eat that together. There's no doubt.
you know,
Carole, I was answering something in the chat and I missed when you did the rosemary, thyme, and bay leaf. Did you uh, tie those together with cooking string?
I did. I did. I
Okay, I
made a
missed it.
little bouquet
Sorry.
garnet so
Yep,
that I can pull it out.
very
So
good.
it's in there. Some of the leaves are falling off. Some of the thyme, some of the rosemary sprigs are falling off. That's all
Great.
fine. But it's really in there to flavor. And I have
Yep.
it at a really high heat right now. And it's looking really great. The mushrooms are searing. I'm going to even turn it up just a little bit. I'm actually going to throw these in right as we speak as well. Okay? Because we have to, I take my time and then suddenly we're right. So I'm going to put those mushrooms in there. They're going to cook. And then what we want to do is ultimately, this soup comes together pretty fast because the mushrooms cook fast. The extra steps are putting a little bit of it in the blender. So I just want to tell you that we need about 4 cups of broth. And I have probably, I'm guessing a cup and a half here of broth. I'm just gonna, there's 2 ways of me checking it, using a 1 cup measure, or actually, if you have a ladle, always try to buy your ladle so you know this is a 1 cup ladle. So if I just literally pour this broth in, I know exactly that it's 1 cup right there. And then here's a little bit. It is literally 1.5 cups. So we need about 4 cups. So I'm going to take the rest of the broth here and I'm going to put 4 cups into here. Okay, so combination of broth, and we might need more broth. So I'm just going to set this aside. But for now, we just have 4 cups of broth in that with the mushrooms and the garlic and the onions. And we're going to put that on high, still cooking, but the mushrooms are looking amazing. And That's going to come to a boil, a soft boil in a moment, not a rapid boil. Now, the rest of the things that are going to go in here is, let's just kind of move some of these things so I kind of can tell you what else is happening here. So the rest of the things is, I love sherry. And some of you might not want to use sherry because you want to avoid the alcohol in your cooking, although most alcohol will cook off. I am going to use a half a cup of sherry, and it's cooking wine sherry. You can buy white wine, a half a cup of wine would go good. If you want to avoid all kinds of any alcohol, which I totally understand, I would suggest that at the very end of the soup, when you're done pureeing a little bit of the soup, when the soup is back in its pot, that you finish it with a little bit of lemon juice and possibly some sherry vinegar. And if you don't have the sherry vinegar, which is one of my favorite vinegars, if you don't have that, then maybe a little red wine vinegar, um, because you need to brighten up. It kind of brings up the flavor. And so that's why I'm suggesting the wine, or the sherry wine, or the white wine, or at the very end. But for now, I actually am using this cooking sherry, and the whatever a kind of alcohol would be in here would cook off. So I've just added a half a cup of sherry. And the rest, what else is going to go in here is, we're going to have, um, I've soaked raw cashews, and they've been soaking since this morning. You could actually soak them overnight. The longer you soak them, the better. You don't want salted cashews. You want raw cashews. I try to buy the ones that are broken pieces. They're a little less expensive. I boil some water if I'm in a hurry, and 30 minutes is okay to soak the cashews, but even overnight is okay. So I've been soaking mine since this morning. We will actually strain the water off these cashews, and we are going to ultimately blend the soup, not all the soup, but we're going to use the cashews, 1 tablespoon of miso, and 1 teaspoon of Dijon mustard. And a little bit of black pepper is definitely going in the soup. We can put some of that in right this minute, just so I don't forget. And
Carol,
yes.
a question about the mustard. What could you use to substitute the mustard?
Mm. I don't have a substitute for mustard, Wendy. Maybe somebody else has a mustard substitute.
Well, in the
Um,
past, I ran into this, and then I also just looked it up online. In the past, I've used vinegar because mustard's often made with vinegar, but horseradish, vinegar, and I forgot the third thing that is they mentioned online we could use. But what do you think of the horseradish as a
I
substitute?
think it's an idea. I don't know about it. I actually love horseradish, and I actually have it in my winter garden at the moment. Well, it's been growing all summer, and I love horseradish, especially when we make our beet horseradish for Passover.
Yep.
But
Turmeric was
I
also.
guess the vinegar would probably, like I said, at the end, I would put that at the end, because you want it to be almost on the top. And I do think, like I said, replacement for the sherry or the white wine would be a red wine vinegar or a sherry vinegar, like, because sherry and mushrooms are like a marriage. They go together. So I guess I would just encourage you, maybe you'll need more vinegar or sherry than you would have planned, because you're missing the oomph of the mustard.
Mhm.
That's my
I have
thinking.
used horseradish once before on a sandwich when I didn't have any mustard, and it seemed to work fine. I just wasn't sure how it would go in the soup. And then
Yeah,
online they mentioned turmeric, which I often use.
yeah. I mean, you know what? I think, I experiment all the time. I always feel my kitchen is like a lab. So I think you try it once, and if it works, it works. It doesn't, you don't do it again. That's just part of, living and learning and making substitutions. If you can't have mustard for some reason in your life, then you have to figure out what are the replacements for it. And I think
Right.
you try, and if you're not successful, then you try something else the next time.
I
The
think
other
that's
thing
a
while
good
we're
idea.
talking,
Oh,
Wendy,
just
just yes, go
Well, I
ahead.
was just going to say, Jim just piped in. Thanks, Jim. Horseradish powder or wasabi powder could give it also a little, the
Yeah,
thing that
that's a good
John
idea.
does. I think it's
Wasabi.
a great idea.
And I also want to mention that we're going to use the cashews twice today, once in the pie and once in the soup. And I just want to say that in the soup, if you are trying to not you have allergies to nuts, or you are really super conscientious of your heart, or you're super conscientious of your fat intake, we're only using a half a cup in the soup. But if for some reason you don't want to have the nuts, give it the creaminess, you can substitute that with cannelli beans. That would be a perfect creaminess substitution, as well as a handful or two of rice. I would put the rice in while the mushrooms are cooking, because you'll want to have that rice cooked. And I would just throw the rice in, or you could do one or so Yukon Gold potato, and that would replace the creaminess. Maybe not the richness that the cashew gives, but certainly the creaminess. And a little bit of soy milk or oat milk or almond milk also would help bring along that creaminess. We don't have any plant-based milk in the soup, but it certainly could go in the soup.
And sorry, one other question. Is there a replacement for the miso? I mean, usually miso is used as a salt, and miso is healthier, according to Michael Greger, than using regular table salt. But
Mhm.
I know you're probably using it combination for the salt and the creaminess or some
And the flavor, the
the
flavor,
flavor.
because the miso has depth,
Yeah,
and so it has a depth. It gives it it's just like the mushrooms. The mushrooms, the variety of mushrooms give it depth too. So if you're gonna omit it, you just omit it. I think it would be okay. But I'm trying to. I created this recipe, um, kind of the way that I would cook things, and I feel like it's kind of necessary. But you
mhm,
certainly could admit it if you don't have it or don't want to use it. It
great.
just, it's, substitutions, once you start substituting, it's just not the same as what the person intended. But I encourage anybody to make it their own. And that's important to learn to take a recipe. We were talking about that at the beginning of the show, Wendy, Jim, and I,
Mhm.
about not being fearful of just because you're plant based and you're SOS, not eating sugar, oil, or salt, doesn't mean that you have to avoid, all the recipes that are online, or avoid recipes. I find so much of my inspiration still in the New York Times, for recipes, but I'm not fearful of them because they say a quarter cup of oil, or they say another, extra teaspoon of salt. I just omit it and try to figure out what's another way to bring up that flavor. And we already know the way to replace oil. We use broth or water. So I just want to encourage people not to run away from their family recipes, or for recipes that they see that just simply inspire them. Whether you're flipping through Instagram or you're on somebody's website that isn't SOS free, that there are substitutions all the time.
Great. And one other question, sorry, it's also on the mustard. Not sorry, but just I know you're eager to move on, and I want to grab these questions while we can. Is it common to have recipes specify Dijon mustard, and why is that important?
Well, there's that yucky kind of hot dog. I call it hot dog mustard. That's bright yellow, and that,
Correct.
that flavor is totally different. And then there's stone ground mustard, which is a very good mustard, which I have in my refrigerator. And that is a little bit of a different kind of mustard. It's a grainier mustard, and it has a little bit of a taste difference. But if all you have is stone ground mustard, then I think that's a fine substitution. But you don't want that. I don't know what it's called. It's been 100 years since I've used any of that kind of what I call hot dog mustard that is so bright yellow. That mustard is not Dijon mustard.
Great.
I
I
so
think in terms of why Dijon also is important, it does have a unique flavor and a unique flavor profile. And it tends to be also a little spicier sometimes than the other mustards, unless you have a label for spicy mustard. But I'd have to look up online what they say specifically about Dijon mustard.
So, and then the other thought I had a thought just when you were talking about Dijon, mustard comes in dry powder too.
Yes.
So you could, I mean, it comes in seeds as well. There's yellow mustard seeds, black mustard seeds, and then there's mustard powder. So, if for some reason you didn't have mustard, Dijon mustard, you could probably put a half to a teaspoon of mustard powder in as a replacement. Okay, I
We're
feel
good.
like we've
Yes.
talked a lot about replacements. I'm almost exhausted from just thinking hard about all the things that replace things. It's it's a
Onwards, onwards and forwards.
so I think what we're going to do this very second is we go this is pretty this soup actually needs to just cook for a little bit, like 15 minutes. I'm lowering up temperature just a little bit. But we need to use the high power blender 2 times today. So I'm thinking I'd like to just at least get the pie in. I'm going to lower this just a little, and I would like to just start the pie even, and we're just going to put the cashews. What I'm going to do is we're going to you know what, I'm going to change my mind. We're going to kind of finish the soup just so it's done, because I would like it ultimately to cook a little longer. That's what I wanted, but it's so almost there that we might as well just continue. It's hard to when you're in the middle of trying to show so much in a little bit of time. But I'm putting the cashews in, and I drain them. That's a half a cup of the cashews. And then, as we've been talking at length about miso as well as mustard, Dijon mustard, and that's going in there as well right now. Now, it will be up to you. Honestly, I do not want to tell you how much soup to take out to puree. I think I recommended that you scoop out about half the soup. This is a real personal preference thing. I love soup when it's somewhat chunky and somewhat smooth. Whether I'm making corn chowder, there's a lot of soups that even if it's a minestrone soup, I'll take a little bit of it out, puree it, and then put the rest of it back in with the chunky soup. So it is a little bit of a style thing for me. So I want to just say to all of you, it's up to you how you would do that, okay? How much you actually choose to take out. So I'm taking out the bay leaf, and I'm also taking out this very hot herb bouquet garnet, and I'm just putting it in the sink for this moment. And I'm going to try to mix this up and get broth and keep a lot of the mushrooms as much, and we might need more broth, but I'm going to say this is about half the soup right here. And I'm going to puree it, but I don't think I'm going to puree it so that it's super smooth, because even though I'm going to kind of make sure that the cashews have to get ground. That's the first and foremost. So I'm going to take it back here to the Vitamix, and we're going to just mix it. Oops. And it's important to have the center part on, because otherwise it's popping out of the center. Okay, I am feeling like that is good enough. It is not super, super smooth. There are some bits and chunks, okay, but it is pretty good. I'm gonna just taste it because I do want the cashews to not be chunky. So, oh my gosh, just this alone is, oh my gosh. Okay, so now we're gonna pour this back into the soup, right? This is the important part. It's going back into the soup, and it's important to get all of it out. Um, And this is what aggravates me about the Vitamix. I love the Vitamix. I will not tell you that I don't love what it is capable of doing. But what I don't like is that the bottom doesn't come off because it's really hard to get out all the things. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little tiny bit of broth in here, and I'm gonna swish it around. I'm actually gonna go back to the machine, believe it or not. This is sometimes how you wash it as well. You put a little water and you put a little soap and then you buzz it around so that all the blades get clean. But I'm just gonna, I want all those sediments to come. This is my quick way of kind of seeing everything. Now I can see the sides. That makes me actually quite happy. And that's just going to go in there. Okay, so the machine now is virtually clean. We need to wash that right away because we are going to use it again for our and we're going to keep this soup at low. I'm going to let it cook a little bit. And basically, we're going to taste it at the end. And we're going to add some chopped parsley. And maybe we'll do that right this minute. Let's just get the soup. We'll have it pretty done, actually. And you can add the parsley at the bowl in the bowl when you're serving it, or you could use it the parsley when you are put. I like putting it in the soup. So I have this little herb keeper, and right now it has a combination of cilantro and parsley in it. This is a herb keeper that I keep in the refrigerator door. It has water at the bottom, and I really like it. I think I've tried every way to keep herbs imaginable. Wrapped in paper towels, put in a jar. I still like to keep the basil on its own with a little plastic bag, but that little herb keeper has water, and it has a little thing at the bottom where you can actually see how much water it has in it. And I change it frequently, the water, kind of like flowers. You want to always have fresh water in it. And we're just going to chop this parsley. And this is flat leaf parsley, and that's going to go into the soup. And of course, we have to taste the soup, but we must get working on the pie so that we have that. And Wendy, in a minute, I'm going to answer any questions because I'll be washing up a little bit because we need that Vitamix blender back so that we can make our filling. And we have the oven already preheating for our pie. So if you're cooking along with me for any reason, you do need to get your oven on at 375 because we are going to make the crust. And when you're making a pie that has a super wet filling, you need to par bake the pie, meaning you have to bake the shell for a very few 5 to 10 minutes. You have to bake the shell so that when you put the liquid in, it's not going onto the wet dough. So this is now mixing. We need a spoon. And we are pretty done with the soup. I'm just going to keep it on low. We'll serve it soon, but I do want it just to have cook a little bit, and I'm going to taste it. It almost always needs some black pepper. It does. It's very delicious. It is very, very delicious. I can show it to you, but we're going to show it in a bowl at the very end. But I just want you to see how pretty it is. It's just mushrooms, but as you stir it, you still have quite a bit of beautiful whole mushrooms. And that's
Well,
really what you want.
it looks absolutely delicious, and I love that you got the creaminess in there because that's one of those things, particularly at Thanksgiving, that's just so satisfying. And if you're having guests who are not whole food plant-based and they want that kind of creamy texture, it really looks like you've achieved that with the cashews.
You know, Wendy, my
Delicious.
mother fed me and we grew up, I swear, on, I mean, my grandmother was an amazing cook and we had, she made homemade soup all the time. But I had my share of Campbell's cream of mushroom soup as a child. Okay. And that was fast for my mother. I'm sure it was fast for many mothers to give them a canned soup. And there's nothing like creamy soup. um what any time of year, it's just so satisfying. It's like one of those comfort foods that you kind of like grow up with and you like it as a adult. At least for me, I like it. Now is a good time. I just need to wash this up really quick and then we're going to move on. But can you just, is there any questions just about the soup, Wendy, while I
I
wash
think
it?
we had our full with the mustards conversation, which was kind
Okay.
of fun and interesting, but just a few comments. And then while you're doing that, I'm going to ask our audience to put in the chat, what do you have in mind for Thanksgiving? What are you thinking of making? And if you're already whole food plant-based, please, especially you, put your ideas in because we have some new people joining us today, as I've mentioned, from the Jumpstart. And so I think your ideas might be particularly valuable. But what are you thinking of making for Thanksgiving as your main dishes?
And I
Or
also think that people get puzzled, Wendy, the most by what is that centerpiece? Like what is the big thing? It's easy to create the sides, the vegetable sides, but what is that big thing? And I know last year I made for a demo, I made that big cauliflower. That was a centerpiece thing. You can make like a bean loaf. That's kind of like what would be a meat loaf. Um, you could make a stuffed squash. Any kind of squash is beautiful on the plate, whether it be a kabocha squash or an acorn squash, and you stuff it with quinoa and other kinds of vegetables and bake that. I mean, there's a lot of ideas.
definitely, many people I know do a vegan or whole food plant-based shepherd's pie, which ends up being very satisfying and delicious. And then, of course, stuffed acorn squash is a favorite of mine, and lentil loaf is a favorite with the mushroom gravy. So I think we're going to change it up this year. But anyway,
And
those
I
are
think
some
I made a
ideas. Let us
mushroom
know in the
gravy
chat.
last year. I'm pretty certain I made a mushroom gravy last year in last year's demo. So there's so many ideas. And it'd be great to get everybody else's ideas. But let's move on so that we get to the pie. If there's not anything else, and maybe Wendy, because I don't see the chat, you can tell me what people are making because I'm so curious.
Well, we
You know?
just have a comment from Jim behind the scenes, cauliflower and jackfruit gumbo, which sounds absolutely
Wow.
delicious. Wow.
Wow.
And thanks, Jim, for piping in. And yeah, put in the chat what you guys are making or you people are making for Thanksgiving. Please let us know.
Okay.
Fun.
So Wendy, we're gonna move on, and
Yep.
I'm gonna tell you about the pie. Okay,
Okay.
it's not a pumpkin pie; it's a sweet potato pie, and I find it to be divine. Now, the filling comes from the minimalist baker. Many of you might know her. She has a blog and she does a lot of baking. And I just slightly adapted her sweet potato pie. And then the recipe that I love, I make a lot of different kinds of pie crust because different pie crusts are good for different things. But this one is one of my favorites. One, because it comes together quickly and easily. And two, because it's gluten free. And I seem to have many gluten free friends. So I'm often trying to cook or bake things that are gluten free so that I don't feel like I'm leaving them out. So this crust is a gluten-free crust. You could substitute, if you aren't interested in it being gluten-free, you could substitute spelt flour or some kind of whole wheat flour if you want. But I would go the whole route of the original recipe. The woman is from My Quiet Kitchen, and I guess I seem to pretty much stick to her recipe, just omitting the salt. And when you're making gluten-free things, especially baking in general, but especially gluten-free when you're using almond flour, if you have a scale, please use the scale, because the scale, and I wrote out the measurements, you need like 1.5 cups of almond flour, but you really ideally need 168 grams. And it's way better to measure the grams than to, it's just more accurate for the baking. So I have 1.5 cups of almond flour, and I have a dog crying by my feet at the moment. So I just like you to be quiet, please. If not, I have to maybe step away for 1 second just to, I don't know, tell her, just I'll have to put her outside or something. But I want to read the ingredients. We need 1/2 cup of brown rice flour. Now you could use white rice flour, but I'm using brown rice flour, and 70 grams. That's 70 grams. Okay. And then we need 1/3 cup or 40 grams of tapioca starch. Okay. And that is important. I would probably not. I know that everyone is wondering, can you use cornstarch? Can you use arrowroot? But I would stick to the tapioca starch in this recipe, because it is pretty foolproof, this recipe. And I think it's best pretty much not to mess with it. Okay. And then we need sweetener, and she recommends 2 tablespoons of pure cane sugar or any other kind of sweetener. Now, our sweet potatoes are going to be very sweet, and so I decided to use a tablespoon of date sugar, and I'm not sure where I put it. Oh, here it is. 1 tablespoon is all I'm putting. If you were making something of this same dough and making a savory pie, I would definitely not omit. You would omit the sugar, and I have omitted 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Okay. Now I just see that my almond flour has some bumps in it, so I'm kind of in here, kind of
Speaking,
dissolving that.
speaking of the flour, Carol, did you say you're using 180 grams of flour?
I might have said that, but it's really 168. I don't think I said that, but you need 168 grams of flour.
168. Okay, very good.
And unlike normal dough, when you are making, if you are a baker and of the past and you used to use butter or shortening, this, and you always needed ice cold water. This water doesn't matter whether it's tepid or warm or cold, but what we do need to do is to be very judicious and be very careful about how much water we add. Now, I make this dough literally all the time, and I know that I almost need 6. It says 5 to 7. I need almost 6 tablespoons. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to do 5. And I just want to tell you that I saw somebody that's in Ottawa, Canada online. He or she was one of the first persons online today. And I saw that they were from Ottawa. And I just want to say, wherever you are, that baking changes based on the moisture in the air, how dry it is where you live. Right now, I live in the Southwest. It's very dry here. I'm at a high altitude. Things bake differently at a high altitude. So you always have to, I'm putting in the 6 tablespoon right now. You might need to have 7. But I'm going to start to use my hands and really bring this ball of dough together. Okay. Now, once you start rolling this, if for some reason it's dry and cracking, then put it right back in the bowl and add a little bit more water. Okay? This dough, I want to say, is very forgiving. So if you're new to making pies, I think this is actually a pretty great way to start because it is a forgiving dough. And as you can see, it's really come together. It's not too wet. If I had gone to 7 tablespoons, I would have had to add more flour, but this is the dough here. Now, you could wrap this in plastic wrap, keep it in the refrigerator for several days and make it ahead of time. That is just fine, but we are pushing forward. I am going to get a piece of parchment. Somebody has just given me yesterday, literally, they said, here is a box of sheet parchments. And I'm sure they bought it at the Costco. Someone has been giving me parchment for the last, I don't know, a while here. And I like the brown parchment. I just want to tell everyone the brown parchment is the nicest, not the bleached white. But I do know that this person shops at Costco and gets this parchment, and it came out in a sheet, which I used today, this morning, and that's right there. So this dough cannot really be rolled on the counter. You really want to get it here on the piece of parchment. And I'm going to just rinse my hands for a moment. But you want to get a little bit of flour. You could use the brown rice flour. I use the almond flour as if the dough is too sticky, but you could use brown rice. It doesn't matter. You just have to use something. And I'm just going to put a little bit, just a little bit on the bottom here, just a little bit and a little bit on top while we roll this out. Okay. And don't forget your oven has to be on 375. And we're just going to begin to roll this out. And you don't want it sticking to your rolling pin. If you are having it sticky, then you've added too much water and you really want to put more flour, like sprinkle flour on the top so you don't end up, you don't want it sticking. Okay. This is not a kind of dough, as I just mentioned, that you can roll directly on the, when I used to make butter, I'd still make that where I work, regular pies with butter and shortening, and those doughs just roll automatically onto the rolling pin. This is not that kind of dough. This dough will want to crack when you pick it up, so you need the support of the parchment paper to pick it up. And even when we finally get it to the pan, it might break, but you're going to see that it can easily be repaired. Okay, so that is about, I want to say 1/8 inch thickness. I could probably show closer up if you want to see, but it's very thin. It's 1/8 inch thickness. I'm going to get a pie pan. This is a 9-inch pie pan here. And what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to put it over and make sure that it goes up the sides. It looks like I could have it a little teeny bit more rolled out over here. And we're just going to do that. My dog is at my feet and she is crying. I know some of you hear her. She really likes being in here when I'm cooking, and I try to put her in a room away. And did you just see that I just naturally flipped that over? I didn't tell you that I was getting ready to flip it over, but I just naturally did. I put my hand under put the pan upside down, and then I just flipped it over. And now we're going to peel away this paper. This paper can be reused. I actually fold it up if it's clean, and I just put it in the fridge in the door. We could roast potatoes or do something else on it. I'm a person that tries to reuse all that paper. So here's our pie, and it didn't really break. when we flipped it over. But if for some reason you are not, when you flip it over, that it starts to, for some, any reason whatsoever, it just breaks, right? It breaks for you. You can mend it just by pushing it back together. Now, again, this is not, if you are a baker from past and you know how things work, folding and using butter and shortening, this is a pie that is not going to be like that. This is gluten free. The dough is a little malleable, and I just see a little piece of brown sugar, and I'm not date sugar that I put, but I am just using this edges, and I'm folding it over, and it wants to crack. It does. It wants to break, but I'm trying to build up the side for the crust, right? And it, like I said, it's pretty forgiving. As soon as you start to pinch it, and if you've got too much, just put a little bit on the side. We can, I don't know, if you had to patch it, that's all okay. But you see, I'm just folding the edges in, and just to build, and I'm going to try to go around the edge with my finger, kind of making sure everything is of the same thickness, because we were folding. And then we're going to shape it so that it's pretty, right? And at this point, you could use a fork and just make a pattern all around it. You don't have to get fancy. The most important thing, I think, is that you just want all your sides to be of equal thickness. So that's why I'm going around several times, and I'm just pushing, and I'm feeling and making sure that everything feels about the same. And if it feels fat, then I kind of push it out. So this is basically what we have right now. Okay, and it's very even on the top. Now I'm going to take my first finger here and my thumb and my forefinger, and I'm going to push, and I'm going to go all around and just make a decorative crust. Okay, there are many, many ways of making decorative crust. Some people use their thumb for the decorative crust. I like using my forefinger, and I like pushing it in between. And in some places, this crust wants to break a little bit, but it's forgiving. You can almost push it back together if a piece wants to break off. And if you feel that it's too sticky, you can put a little flour on your finger or any, and just get it so that it's not sticking. And it's very forgiving, as I've mentioned 3 times now. And I'm just going around, and and some of it is sticking to my finger. And what we're going to do is par bake this for 5 to 10 minutes. 10 minutes is the most ideal, but 5 minutes, because we're going to put a wet filling in. And what we want to do is take a fork and prick the bottom. That, and often, again, if you were a baker of butter and of different kind of baker than what we're doing now, plant-based baking and whole food, you sometimes would have to put a piece of parchment and beans to weigh the dough down. This dough stays exactly the way it is without having to put any kind of weights. So we're able just to put this right into our oven this very second. So we're going to put this in, and I'm going to try to be very diligent and watch the time, but we're going to have it in there for 10 minutes, okay? And we're just going to get rid of all this close by. And now we're going to make the filling. Wendy, before I move on, is there any questions that anybody is having about the crust? We don't
No,
have a
not
lot of
yet.
time, but we have
Not
a few seconds.
Not yet, Carole. It's such a treat. You are a professional pastry chef. And so watching you take care in just the way you do of that pie crust is really something. And I know for me, I have to just get a lot more patient in the kitchen if I'm going to do something like that. But your skill as a professional pastry chef really comes through. So
I have
thank
to
you for
tell
that.
you, At my work where I work, we'll probably make 500 pies the week of Thanksgiving.
Unbelievable.
And although it's quite stressful to make pie after pie after pie, there's a little bit of meditation that I find in it. And I think it's what you're talking about in watching me. I sometimes lose myself in my thoughts, and because it's a very relaxing process for me. And
Mm.
I I think that I don't know. One does have to be patient, like you're saying. I think
It's
that's
quite
important.
beautiful. It looks like it's going to be a beautiful
But I
pie
do think
already.
being patient is the right word, Wendy. You know, like you have to just give yourself, and I do have to say baking is practice, practice, practice. You know,
Right.
if you can't do it or you think that you're not that great at it, I really strongly encourage you that it's a practice, practice, practice. So
I
let's
will
make
add, we got a quick comment, just so you know, a lovely participant says that you're explaining everything so well. She's quite new to this, and we knew we were getting new people today, and you're making her feel not so afraid of failure. So well
oh,
done.
you
And
know what? I
something
have
else,
to tell you, even when you're experienced, you fail. I mean, there was a cake that I was making here at my job, and I failed for 3 times. 3 times. Why did I fail? It was the altitude here, and I had to adjust the baking soda and the baking powder. And each time I adjusted, but I almost gave up. But the cake that I wanted to make was so delicious that the fourth time I finally got it right. So I just want people to know that failure is okay, because you learn from it, right? You have to, and you can't be defeated.
they
You
say, learn to fail or fail to learn. That's what
yes,
I've
there
often
you
grown
go.
up with. Learn to fail or fail to learn. And in this, it's kind of fun failing. I mean, in this case, you're just making a pie or a cake or a crust. But yeah, we can learn from the failures for sure. Okay, I know time is
Well,
short.
yeah, time is of essence. So I just want to show the rest of the thing. So I cooked sweet potatoes, and in the recipe, she says so that it's important to roast your sweet potatoes, not to steam them. And why is that? Because when you roast them, they give up much more sugar and much more caramelization, opposed to I love steaming things. I think I talked endlessly last fall or at some point about just steaming vegetables and steaming potatoes because they're so creamy. But this, you really want to be sure to use sweet potatoes, and you want to roast them in an oven. 375 is usually around what I do. And just till they're soft, you peel the skin. We measured and we smashed them. And then we needed a cup and 3/4. So that is what I have in here, a cup and 3/4. The next thing that we need to have a cup of water. So let's just get a newer cup out, and let's get that water in. Now, something she doesn't say to do. Basically, all the ingredients go into this Vitamix, but I never think of putting cornstarch and just dumping it in. One, because it could have big chunks, and two, I want it to dissolve. So I measured out the cup of water, and I'm going to put most of the water, but I am going to take the 2 tablespoons of cornstarch, and this is not in the directions, and I'm sure it would turn out okay, but I tend to really want my cornstarch dissolved before I go putting it in anything. That is just my own experience. So this is part of the cup of water that I put the 2 tablespoons. That is going to go in there now. And the recommended sweetener is maple syrup. She recommends 3/4 of a cup. I have cut it back to a third of a cup. Why? Because I think sweet potatoes have their own natural sweet potato taste. And I think that it would be very, very sweet with 3/4 of a cup. But I do want you to know that that is the original recipe. In the recipe I wrote up, I said that I use 1/3 to 1/2 cup. So that will be up to you how much sweetener you use, but I measured out 1/3 cup of syrup. Okay. And then we have soaked cashews. We have 1/4 cup of soaked cashews, and I'm just looking. That's one, and I already drained it, and those are going in here. That's going to give it its creaminess. Often in pumpkin pie, people use the sweetened condensed milk, and we're not using that. We're using the cashews. We need 2 teaspoons of vanilla. That's our flavor. And then additionally, we have 1 teaspoon of cinnamon and a half a teaspoon of ground nutmeg. Um, I love grinding my own nutmeg. If you've never seen nutmeg before, I have a little nutmeg by Microplane, and it has a little storage case. And nutmeg comes whole in a little, looks like a little nut, and there is nothing to replace fresh nutmeg. So I strongly suggest that you grind it yourself and make your half teaspoon. But nutmeg is it's heavenly. You could add a pinch or so of cloves if you feel like it. I think cloves would be additionally quite lovely in this. And now we're going to take all of this and we're going to blend it. We're almost at our 10 minutes for our pie crust. It's not ready quite, but it will be ready in a minute. And let's just move all these things that we don't need anymore out of the way. And we're going to take this to the Vitamix and we're just going to super blend it. And we're going to get the lid, of course, which is here. And of course, I didn't wash the whole thing. I only washed parts of it.
Carole, while you're washing, what about the Japanese sweet potatoes?
Those you could try those. It would give you a white sweet potato pie, and they make sweet potato. I've seen purple sweet potato pie.
Mm-hmm.
So you could do that too if you want to be very dramatic. That seems more like a Halloween treat to me, but then a Thanksgiving thing. You don't want to scare anybody at Thanksgiving, but it's an idea, Wendy. It's a good idea. I don't know. I haven't tried it. I've just used the sweet potatoes and I find it to be delicious. But let me blend this for a minute. Disaster occurred. Can you guys see that?
We see it. We were just.
Oh my God. I just created disaster. Oh my gosh. This is disaster. Well, you guys see, we were just talking about making mistakes, but let me see if I can solve. Oh my God, it's all over the cabinets. It's everywhere. Oh my God. What a disaster.
What happened? The top wasn't on?
The top, I opened the top and I was going to put this in it and then it flew out. But let's just be very calm about all of it at the moment. We can't get all excited about a mistake. We have to be calm and we have to, oh dear. The dog is looking at me like, what is going on with you? Okay, well, I will have a big cleanup. We won't be able to fill the entire pie, but let's just see what's going on in here. Let's get rid of all of this. It's a mess. That is a disaster that I have to say is on camera now. And it's a little embarrassing. But you know what? I just want to show you that these things do happen, and I'm definitely not perfect. But the sauce is perfect and it looks delicious. The only thing that's not good is that it's not going to fill my pie, but we don't have a problem with that. It's okay. So let's just pretend that we're really finishing it. We have a full batch of that and then it's not on the cabinets. And boy, how exciting is that? I have to say. That is for the records, Wendy.
I think it's, I still have some kind of soup, cauliflower soup on my ceiling. Yep, you just looked up.
I
I've
looked up
never been able
because
to get it off.
I recently cleaned my light up on the ceiling, and I was like, oh, there's tomato sauce up there. Do you know? Like, so things do fly, but this is a disaster. Now the puppy is actually licking it. I don't know if that's such a good thing, but I do want to say that here's our par baked pie. Can
Wow.
you
Now
see that
that
it's
looks amazing.
can you see that it's a little teeny bit brown? And
Yep.
the only thing that's not going to be great, you everyone, is that it's not going to, because I lost some of the filling, it's not going to be full. It's just not going to be full. Um,
It's
and
not a
maybe
disaster, Carol. It's just aesthetically different. Don't you worry.
Yeah, I'm not going to worry because we have a backup. But again, it's a matter of getting it all out of here. That is an aggravation of my own when I use the Vitamix. It's actually not so bad, to tell you the truth. In fact, when we finish this little demo, I might get some of that off the counter, get it into the blender so that I don't feel that I have half a pie here. And I might rescue and be able to make this pie full. But I just want to show you that this goes in. We're not missing a ton of actually. And this will go into the oven at 375. Let's put this back here. Oh, it's so beautiful. Let's put this in the, it's like a Halloween scare, you know?
This is a
This
fixable problem, Carol. Not to worry.
This is going to go in the oven at the same temperature, 375, that we par baked, and it's going to bake for 10 minutes at 375. Set a timer, 10 minutes. Then you're going to lower your oven to 325, and then it's going to bake for anywhere for 45 to 50 minutes, okay? 45 to 50 minutes. This is hot. I could put it in right now. It's almost full. I didn't lose so much. It looks more disastrous than it is, but I'm not going to put it in the oven because I think I'm going to somehow manage to scoop some of it off the counter. So, but the great thing about this is that we have a beautiful pie right here. Da,
Ah,
da, da, da.
wonderful.
So that's how one can accept disaster at the moment, because one can knows that they have a backup pie. So we are going to serve the soup, Wendy. We're going to cut the pie. You could make a coconut using coconut cream, just taking the fat off in the can, not the liquid, and whip it up and make a coconut cream or a cashew cream. I do know that tahini. I don't think a lot of you have this, but there's a thing called black tahini, and you might say, "What? Where does that come from, black tahini?" Well, there are such things as black sesame seeds, and companies do make black tahini, which honestly tastes different than the beige tahini that we're all familiar. Tahini goes so delicious with sweet potatoes that I have to tell you that the way that I decided to serve this was with a little bit of tahini on it.
I think that's
instead,
such a brilliant idea. I
instead
never would
of
have thought that.
Now, as you know, Wendy, I know you know this because we've done this pie eating together many times, that the first piece is always disaster. Uh, Getting it out of the pan can be disaster. But you know what? You've already seen one disaster for me today, so you might as well just witness whatever disaster is going to occur here. But maybe not. Maybe it's actually going to come out perfectly. Here we go.
Beautiful.
Here
Absolutely
is our
beautiful.
pie. No disaster is occurring whatsoever. And it's cut beautifully. I just want to show you that it's cut beautifully.
Gorgeous.
I'm just going to put this on the plate. Now I've taken the black tahini and I've added a little water but no matter what, it's never going to drizzle like chocolate. So it's up to you how you, if you want to put little dots of black, however you want. You want to put a streak on the plate and just make it beautiful like that, a streak. And then what I love is pomegranates are out right now, and a little pomegranates on top of the sweet potato pie with the black tahini is my little invention of the garnish.
That
So,
looks so
so,
colorful,
so
so
it's just
Thanksgiving.
color. It's colorful, and you won't believe it until you try the combination. But black tahini with the sweet potatoes, and sweet potatoes seem to be yummier than the pumpkin. And then we just need our ladle, and our ladle is actually on. Uh oh, uh-oh, something is going off an alarm. Uh-oh, I think I've created disaster somehow. We better end the show in a minute, Wendy, because my fire alarm is going off.
We
But
will. The
here's the
soup
soup.
looks delicious.
Here's the soup. I cannot stop the fire alarm. This has been an exciting show. Wendy, you wrap it up, and
I
I'll go
will. You
see
have a
what's going
question
on.
before you leave, Carol. One question. How much time did the pie congeal before you got such a perfect slice? Or how long would you let it sit for?
45 minutes in my oven. At 45 minutes.
No, after you've taken it out of the oven, since you had
Oh,
a
I let it for
preheated one.
many hours. Many hours.
And would you normally do it if you take it out of the oven? Would 10 minutes suffice?
No, you have to wait. I would say several hours.
Okay, very good. Talk to you later.
Okay, bye.
Hi, everyone. We're back. Starters and desserts with a little fun action in between. I'm sure we've all been there. I've certainly done this, and I still have soup on my ceiling here that I can't seem to get off. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us. I just wanted to go through again anyone who is at Plant Powered Metro New York or at this show for the first time. We have a bunch more events coming up, so please join us. The first in the series, Know Your Numbers, is already recorded and on our YouTube channel. And Wednesday, November 13th, we have the second show in the series, Know Your Numbers. This one is about achieving your healthy weight. We have Rethink Thanksgiving, which is going to be an in-person event next Monday, I believe, Monday the 18th, downtown in New York City on Houston Street. And then we have a Harlem movie night. We're going to be watching as a community Plant Pure Nation. Please join us for that. This is at the Jinyan Cafe, and it's just a lovely place to get vegan food and be a community and watch the film. And then an event on November 20th, Eating for Health, Longevity, and Aging. This will be at the Marlene Meyerson, JCC, Manhattan. So please join us for that. And then part 3 of Know Your Numbers. And finally, at the end of the month, the Plant Powered Potluck in downtown Brooklyn. So join us for any of these events. We, of course, love to have you. Just realized I forgot to mention when the next show is. It'll be in December, but I forgot to put the date. Oh, December 15th. We're going to be back on December 15th, our usual time and channel, 5 to 6:30. For information about these events, please join us. Please go to the website at Plant Powered, all spelled out, Plant Powered Metro New York, NY.org, and you can find the events there. Thank you to Jim Spellos behind the scenes. Thank you to David Bowles, who always helps out. And thank you to the entire team at Plant Powered Metro New York. You can reach Carole at the Veggie Vanguard. I think that's right. Yeah, Carole at the veggievanguard.com. And on Instagram, you can follow her at the Veggie Vanguard. So those are all the links. I'm delighted to have you here today. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy early Thanksgiving. And we'll see you back here in December.
And thank you, everyone. And sorry for running away. I had to turn the fire alarm off. I have no idea why it went off, but it's part of the excitement of Cooking with Chef Carole, I guess. And thank you so much for joining. The pie is divine. I just want to tell you that. And I hope everyone gives it a try. And have a good Thanksgiving. Let's wrap it up, Wendy.
Well, wrapping it up. Hey, happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Thanks for